WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham, and sad to say, sadly, it's the last day for Malachi Barrett for Bridge Detroit.
It's been a fun ride. Thank you for having me. It's been a while. I'm really sad, actually. It's a beautiful Friday, but this is melancholy for me.
Melancholy. It really is. I just think, you jumped in, you grabbed the bull by the horns, and you just kind of rode it. You just never let go. You just rolled it. You've been really just riding the wave. So I love it so much. What's happening on the program today?
Well, today we're going to talk about what is in a name. Detroit's neighborhood names sometimes carry a lot of significance. We're going to talk with somebody who investigated the meaning behind some of those names later in the hour.
Awesome. Plus, it's the 34th anniversary of Americans with Disabilities Act, and Ford will talk with someone who's making technology more accessible to people with disabilities.
But today, to open up our program today, we're going to talk about the Detroit Documenters. The city council is going on recess for August, but that doesn't mean all local government meetings are going to stop. Many of these public meetings happening every week are covered by the Detroit Documenters. They're a newsroom partner of WDET. You've probably heard them featured on the Metro a few times. And now we're excited to announce a new project with them. We're starting off something new with the Documenters. Each Friday, we're going to be joined by members of the team to talk about not only what's happening at these government meetings, but also how you can be engaged with Detroit and some of the suburban communities as well. On the show today to discuss their work and a recent transit meeting are two Detroit Documenter coordinators with us, Lynelle Herndon and Noah Kincade. Lynelle and Noah, thank you for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yes. Thanks for being here. Of course, you're part of the WDET family, so it's only important and it's only right that we have you guys on the show every single week to talk a little bit about what you all do. So, Lynelle, starting with you, how did you get into journalism?
Well, I started with Detroit Documenters and Outlier Media by becoming a Detroit Documenter. So I started taking notes at public meetings in 2019.
Wow. So 2019 got you started. And what did you like about it so much that you said, you know what, I'm going to really take off with this?
The opportunity existed. I think what I really love is the chance to have average, everyday Detroiters kind of telling what's going on in their own voice. Documenters can write notes in any style that they want, and so that's what I really kind of value about the work.
Yeah, and Noah, same thing with you. How'd you get into journalism or even get into Detroit Documenters?
Same, through becoming a Detroit Documenter. Back in 2021. Yeah. And it's been amazing to just learn so much about the city and what's going on, and to learn it firsthand in these meetings. Mm-hmm. You're the first one who finds out all the new exciting opportunities for Detroiters and all the new developments in government.
And both of you have taken leadership roles. And Noah, just sticking with you, you started off as a documenter just like Lynelle, but then you decided, I want to take this further. I want to start to lead others and teach others how to do the same thing. What was the pull there?
It's a dream job. It really is. It's a dream program. I've always been one of these, geeks that I've always gone to public meetings. They interest me. I find them fascinating. I know that sounds crazy, but I really do. I love being in them. I love learning. And so to be able to help organize a group of Detroiters to do that same thing, and then to be able to just bring all the news that comes out of these meetings to Detroiters for their own good. It's how could I not?
I'm in a lot of meetings in my role with Bridge Detroit, covering city council and other bodies. And, sometimes these meetings can be not so exciting. Yeah. People's eyes can kind of glaze over a little bit when they're looking, especially some of the more kind of obscure bodies. But there's a lot of really important discussions and decisions that are being made, in these places that don't often have the public eye. Can you tell us more about the importance of being in these rooms and creating a record for these meetings that otherwise a lot of folks probably wouldn't know about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it's important that everybody understands they can be in these meetings. You know, so many people don't understand that. These are public meetings that are open to the public. There are laws that guarantee your right to be there. And, you know, these people serve us, not the other way around. So a lot of what we do is educational, as well as, you know, going out there and news gathering. Like, we want people to understand their rights as residents of the city, and actually the fact that you don't even need to be a resident of the city. This is an open public meeting, and anyone can be there.
One thing that I think is really great about this too is that you're training residents, you're empowering them really with tools to be able to, you know, understand what's happening at these meetings and then communicate that to other folks. And I think it's really building a network of like civically active people. So tell us more about how you can become a documenter, what's required, how do you get signed up for this if people want to join up?
Right. So anyone in Detroit or the surrounding area can be a Detroit documenter. Documenters come from maybe up to 45 minutes, an hour outside of the city. Just live, love, work in the city of Detroit. You need to be 16 years or older and know how to read, write, and navigate the internet, and then we'll train you to do the rest. Our next training is August 1st. It's online. You can go to detroit.documenters.org, make a free account, and register for the orientation, and we'll show you how to get started.
So right now, just thinking about what you just said, the city council is taking a break throughout August. Will most public boards be on break at the end of the summer?
No. Everybody else is rocking steady. We have plenty of assignments, but with city council being out, we do kind of have that space for kind of one more meeting. So we love to play around with other community meetings, experiment with special assignments. So we have a lot of fun in the summer. So it's a great time to get started with us.
So, you know, we think about some of the bigger public bodies in Detroit, like the city council or the board of police commissioners, which creates, you know, oversight for the police department. There's also a lot of smaller bodies that are pretty influential. I'm thinking of like the planning commission or the board of zoning appeals or the board of ethics. You know, we could kind of go on and on. You guys were able to cover the transit. It's the Suburban Mobility Organization, basically. SMART is the acronym.
I can never remember what it stands for, honestly.
Yeah, and it's
smart buses.
Yeah, you see a smart bus riding down the street. Maybe you ride them around. I mean, obviously that's a very important regional transportation organization, but it's behind this body that maybe folks don't know about. You got the chance to speak with Lucas Lasecki of Transit Riders United. He was there to represent some smart riders. We're going to play a real quick clip from that today.
The drivers, they're working without a contract, and between that and the low pay that they've been given, it makes it difficult to attract new drivers, and SMART is short close to 100 drivers, which is having major impacts on service reliability. If 2 drivers call off sick, they start canceling buses, and that's a daily occurrence in Oakland County. It's not sustainable, and it's leaving us bus riders stranded all the time.
So there's, you know, clear impact there, driver shortage connected to this contract situation. Do you guys have any word on when a contract might be reached? Can you give us some more context on the situation, Noah?
Sure. Yeah, I went down there yesterday as they were protesting. I spoke with Kevin Colon, who's the president of the union representing the SMART operators. It's kind of up in the air. So right now the negotiations are in a fact finding status, which is actually, like, in negotiations, kind of like the last ditch effort, right? To come to an agreement. Both sides kind of make their best offers, and then a mediator tries to figure out what the best deal is for both sides. But it's really unclear. Like, this could take, who knows? It could take forever. Really, they've not had a contract since January of last year, of 2023. And they can't strike because they're in Michigan. They're considered government workers, and government workers can't strike. So they don't have a whole lot of leverage here. But what was interesting that the president said to me was that this isn't. It sounds like they may have come to kind of agreeable terms on their pay, but it's really the operators have been stripped from a retirement plan. So if you came in right now as a new driver, you're not going to have any kind of retirement plan. And that is actually also contributing to this shortage of drivers, because, you know, if someone is looking for a job as an operator, they could just go somewhere else that has, you know, better benefits package.
Yeah, we hear that a lot in the context of the city's bus system as well. So it's interesting. This is, you know, kind of a larger issue. I'm thinking as well about some of the things that you guys have brought forward in terms of like accountability for public bodies that are supposed to notice their meetings and hold them in a way that the public can access. And Noah, you had raised some issues with the Wayne County Stadium Authority. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about just working through that process of like trying to document this meeting in itself can be, you know, a big effort, a big challenge?
Yeah, I'd love to. They're an interesting case. They're the only authority that I found in the area that doesn't post any. They don't even have a web page. They have no presence at all online, and they don't. So there's nowhere you can go online to see when their next meeting is. And the only place you can do that is in a bulletin board in the lobby of the Guardian building where they meet. So every time like yesterday, because I was right across the street at the Bull building, I popped in there. I run in, take photos of the bulletin board, so I have all the meeting notices. And there isn't, normally there's at least one up there, but there's nothing about the Stadium Authority right now. So they're only, I think, required to meet once a year. So I mean, they met was a couple months ago, and it had been slightly over a year since they had met the last time. So,
and that's a pretty influential. Can you just briefly describe what the Stadium Authority is supposed to do?
Yeah, so they. My understanding is, I'll give it my best shot. Right, they own They own the not Little Caesars, but they own Ford Field and
Comerica Park.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and then lease them to those organizations. And they basically were the body that I think put together the bond package that helped fund those developments. They also right now, kind of the big story that they've been a part of for the last year anyway, is that they own the two parking lots that are right outside of Comerica Park that the District Detroit development, like the first two buildings that were supposed to be a part of that, were supposed to be built on those lots. And I don't even think it came out until after the whole project was approved that they didn't even own those lots. They're owned by the Stadium Authority. So,
well, in construction on those two, we're supposed to start this year, and that's been delayed now. So that's,
yeah,
there are other reasons we've been told, beyond that negotiation, but that's certainly part of it. So that's just an example of a pretty influential body that is not, always accessible for the public.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going forward, Lynelle, I just want to talk about going forward with throughout the month of August and some of the other things you talked about, experimental project with projects and special projects that you all have. So what are some of the things that we can see from you all?
I mean, I'm not ready to announce the project quite yet,
yeah.
but yeah, we have orientation coming up and then deeper training on how to cover your local government. What else are we doing? Like the type of projects that we do outside of public meetings are, for instance, documenters on the bus, where documenters have ridden the bus and kind of documented that experience. Like, what is the environment like? Is it safe? Is it dirty? Is the bus on time, which is a big one? And so we're planning to enter some other public spaces. I'll just say that.
Cool beans. Really excited about that. And, looking forward to talking to you all next Friday. You got a preview for us of what we can expect next Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll have a lot to talk about, I think, concerning next Tuesday's formal session, which is, as Malachi said, it's the last one before they go on break. These sessions before their recesses often run 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. They can be really crazy. One of the things I'll be looking for out of that meeting is appointments to they're going to appoint a director for the Board of Zoning Appeals and also a new inspector general.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us, and definitely listeners should look forward to more conversations. They're going to be back every Friday. Till then, you can find a lot of information on public meetings at detroit.documenters.org. Lynelle and Noah, thank you so much for being here with the Metro.
Thanks for having us.
So Coming up, it's the 34th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act, and we will chat with two people that are making the digital world more accessible to people with disabilities. You all stay right there. Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham.
And I'm Malachi Barrett.
Bridge Detroit reporter Malachi Barrett. And coming up, we're going to talk about the 34th anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. What will you do if you logged into your computer right now and it didn't work for you? Will you find a way to make it easier for yourself, or would you just give up and not use it? There are many people with disabilities who use technology who have struggled with this, but for some, they may soon change. That may soon change. That's because a recent ruling from the Justice Department is ensuring that many websites need to be accessible for people who have disabilities. What's more, today marks the 34th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which aims to end discrimination against people with disabilities. Here to the show, is Mark Pound. He is the CEO of Curb Cut OS, an organization founded by people with disabilities focused on making real digital accessibility. Mark, welcome to the Metro.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Doing pretty well. How are you today?
Pretty good.
Awesome. And also with us, we have Al Pozzoli, an accessibility support engineer and longtime user of accessible technology. Al, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Glad to be here as well.
Awesome. So, Mark, 34 years later, what impact has the ADA had on people living with disabilities?
Well, I find that an interesting and loaded question because, here we are in 2024 in a digital world that's increasingly become more digital by the second. And yet we're still with the majority of digital assets out there that are inaccessible. And so, that's part of the reason why we do what we do, because we need to change that. We need to get progress in that front, and progress that needs to happen sooner than later. So hopefully that answered your question, because there has been some progress. However, it's just not where it needs to be.
And Mark, just sticking with you for a moment, you're the CEO of Curb Cut OS. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work that you all have done to make digital, that realm, a little bit more accessible?
Sure. So we've been around since 2019, started off as a very small solopreneur company and have slowly grown over the years since then. And what we do is we focus on auditing and remediating websites, apps, documents, design, pretty much anything that is digital. There isn't anything out there that we have not done to date. And we do it at the code level. So we do it at the level to where assistive technology knows how to interact with those digital assets.
And we're going to switch gears here. Al, welcome to the show once again. Give us a little background on you as well and what you do.
Okay. I am employed by TPGI, formerly known as the Paciello Group. We are a company under the Vispero brand, and our goal is to help our clients craft inclusive digital experiences, and we also do that by providing audits, remediation, consulting services, automated scans. Under the Vispero brand, we also have Freedom Scientific, who are the makers of JAWS for Windows. That's the premier screen reader for those of us who are blind in the world. We also manufacture various magnification solutions and the ZoomText screen magnification software.
Thank you, Al, for that. And I'm thinking about what you just said, of course, the additions and the different additions to the computer in order to help you see a little bit better or to navigate a little bit better. What are examples of barriers on websites that a lot of us aren't aware of?
Okay, so let's take a couple of different real-life examples I've run into. For those who don't know, I've been blind my whole life, and I've been a user of assistive technology since the mid-'80s, I guess I would say. And I've run into various examples over time. And when you talk about WCAG, you talk about the principles of accessibility: poor, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And I'll just talk about a couple of examples there. So examples of issues that you deal with in terms of perception. Let's talk about a physics textbook, for example. This is a real-life situation I ran into at one point. In this online physics textbook, there was a diagram of an atom. And you have a diagram of an atom, and if there's no alt text on that picture, alt text means it's essentially a description of the picture that technology can pick up. If there's no alt text on that picture, I, as a blind user, can't perceive that picture at all. So what do, right? You can add alt text that just says diagram of an atom. Well, now technically you've checked that box and you've fulfilled that requirement, but you really haven't solved the problem because you haven't given us anything useful. So that's what this is about. It's about not only just checking the box, it's about how do you check the box and how do you make the description of the item useful. And, maybe you need to get a subject matter expert to help with that. Maybe sometimes you don't, depending on the situation.
Yeah. And Al, just sticking with you really quickly, because you said you've been using these technologies since the mid-'80s. So what are some of the things that you've seen improve over the years, and especially in what way have you helped improve some of those technologies being a user?
I've seen things evolve. Back in the 80s, I was using an Apple IIe, and then I was using DOS, and those were text mode applications. Mm-hmm. So, you're looking at a screen with, 80 columns of text, 25 lines, and everything was just on a printed screen. And then we got into the graphical user interface in the mid-'90s or so, and I think a lot of those of us who are users of assistive technology were very nervous at that time because we didn't know if we were stepping forward or stepping back. Yeah. But, moving into Windows really wound up being a blessing. It has worked very well for us, and we were able to engage with technology such as the World Wide Web. But as Mark said, there's always work to do. One of the things that happens in this industry is everybody likes to change things, and we make things work in one application or in one operating system, and then 2 years later there's new versions of everything. So you're starting back, got to catch up again.
Yeah, lack of consistency in terms of the technology spreading across different areas. So that's very interesting. Right now we're chatting with Al Pozzoli, an informative and assistive technologist and longtime user of accessible technology, and Mark Pound, the CEO of Curb Cut OS, an organization founded by people living with disabilities focusing on making real digital accessibility. So, Al, sticking with you really quickly, just talking a little bit about some of the websites you've been able to navigate, especially some of those public spaces, whether it's government, whether it is a university, whatever those spaces may be that are meant for the public. How easy is it to navigate right now? What's happening with that?
For the most part, it's pretty easy. And one thing that I want to clarify is accessibility is not an on-off. It's not like most sites are not accessible or inaccessible. It's kind of a continuum, right? And I can navigate probably 99% of websites. Some are just a little more difficult than others, and will make me mutter twice words sometimes, but I can navigate most of them. You run into issues sometimes if developers who are unaware throw up roadblocks. For example, there is what's called a CAPTCHA. And a CAPTCHA are those things that we see to verify whether or not we're human or robots. And, maybe there'll be one where I have to click all the airplanes in an image or something like that, right? Oftentimes when you get one of those, you'll have an audio alternative. So you can hit a button to get an audio puzzle that you can solve instead of having to look at the images. But those things can be very problematic if there's no alternative solutions.
Yeah. And Mark, bringing you back into the conversation. So we did have a recent DOJ amendment to ADA. If you could explain to us just a little bit, very, very lame, like very, like I'm a 5-year-old almost, if you can explain this to me, what the recent amendment change was.
Oh, boy. I can't even keep up. I can't even keep current on all of that. And that is a question that is above my pay grade, as I like to say. Yeah. My chief accessibility officer would be somebody who could answer that much better, and probably Al could answer that for you, probably a lot better than I can. So obviously, I don't know everything, and I never claim to know everything, but obviously we rely on the experts, and probably Al could do a better job than me on that.
Then let's bring Al in. Al, what do you know?
I'm going to have to defer as well. I could help you fix your computer. It would be an accessibility issue, but I'm not a legal guy, so nope. Sorry.
No, and it's fine. That's perfectly fine, because I know that one of the amendments or the title changes were to make sure that those public spaces, whether it's government, whether it's the university, wherever there are public spaces that should be shared and open to all, should be accessible. So I would love to talk just a little bit about the civil rights aspect of it, if we can. I think we can go into that a little bit more. I think we can do that. Just talk about the civil rights aspect of it and the importance of making sure that these technologies across the board, no matter what we're doing, are usable for all people. So we're going to start with you, Mark.
If I understand the context to your question, by the way, Al, I wasn't trying to set you up. I was trying to just figure out between the two of us. I figure we might have it, but yeah, I'm right. We're not the lawyer side of things, because I think the one thing that we need to bring forward here is with the DOJ, with the ADA, with WCAG, with all of these, we're still in this emerging market, and it's these regulations and these standards are continuously evolving. So to your question about civil rights, if I understand that correctly, my point to this is, I wasn't born with a disability. I ended up with a disability because of a football accident and then a massive car accident. So I've got multiple spine and nerve traumas. And, from a civil rights standpoint, I had to recover. I had to go through a lot of things. And what it made me realize during that journey was, regardless of what we're dealt in life, we all get one shot. We don't get a reset button. And we all want the same thing. We want to contribute, and we want to enjoy this journey that we have, because it's not as long as we think it is. So from a civil rights standpoint, hey, why don't we all have the equal opportunity to be able to enjoy it? And even in this digital age that is moving so fast, but yet so far behind. Yeah. And so kind of a long-winded answer, but I think, that answers from a civil rights standpoint.
Thank you so much, Mark. Al, same thing to you.
Okay, well, I think for me, I was in high school. I think I graduated high school. I know I graduated high school in 1991. And so I think I was one of the first generations to hit college after the ADA was signed. So I've lived most of my adult life with the ADA being in effect, and so I can't really speak to what things are like prior to that. But the ADA has given me the ability to go through life and not worry whether I'm going to have accommodations, whether I can find transportation to work, whether various things are going to be accessible to me in public spaces. So I really can't comment on what things were like before or how the impacts were like prior to the 90s. But I think that the fact that I didn't have to worry about those things in my life has been very impactful. I could just live my life and do my best. And those were challenges that I didn't have to deal with.
I want to say thank you both for being here with us today. Al Pozzoli is an accessibility support engineer and longtime user of accessible technology. We have Mark Hound, the CEO of Curb Cut OS, an organization founded by people living with disabilities focused on making real digital accessibility. I want to say thank you both for joining us on the Metro today, and you all have a great day.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Coming up, what are the origins of Detroit's neighborhood names? How do they get named in the first place? We'll talk with somebody who's dug into the answers behind those questions.
Welcome back to the Metro here on 101.9 WDET FM. Really, really cool, interesting conversation is coming up right now, Malachi.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. We're going to talk about how we define Detroit's neighborhoods, which I've always been curious about as a newer resident here. When I ask people where they're from or where they live, there's a lot of different ways that they use to describe it.
Yeah, so one of my favorite things, I grew up here, born and raised. I grew up in the Warrendale community on Detroit's west side. And one of my favorite things is when you ask a Detroiter where they're from, they usually give you two cross streets. So they usually say, I'm from so-and-so and so-and-so. For me, it's Joy and Southfield. So you'll often hear the two cross streets when Detroiters are talking about where they're from. But I'm really fascinated to learn about the names of these communities in these neighborhoods. So Malachi, what are we in for?
Yeah, well, sometimes it's even kind of disputed. So I live on the east side in what some people call the Pingree Park neighborhood, but I've also heard Gratiot Grand or Gratiot Woods, and I just now tell people like Van Dyke Mac. That's like where I'm at.
Perfect.
So who decides what we call Detroit neighborhoods? Many Detroiters identify themselves as east siders or west siders, or they'll give you the cross street. Some neighborhood names have a long history, like Corktown, the oldest neighborhood in the city. Others come from nearby landmarks. But changes in the city sometimes cause the original context of that to no longer make sense. And then there's neighborhoods that are officially recognized by the city of Detroit. In 2016, the city created a Department of Neighborhoods that was tasked with defining boundaries and naming every corner of the city. And there's a really interesting genealogy of neighborhood maps and names that can be traced through time. With us to discuss what makes a neighborhood is Alex Hill. He's a local researcher, cartographer, and founder of Detroitography, a very cool website all about creatively mapping Detroit. Alex, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I know this is something you're really passionate about. Tell us more about how you became interested in how we define neighborhoods, and why is it important to look at now in this stage of the city's history?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it was important ages ago to start thinking about too, and engaging people around what they call their neighborhood. Because I think, like Tia mentioned, it's people talk about their cross streets.
Yeah.
We don't really have the association with the names that a lot of other cities have. But for me, I was a new transplant to the city. That's why I started mapping the city, so I could better understand it. And this concept of neighborhoods and names was something that just constantly was churning and percolating. So, I don't know if you want. I can dive right into the genealogy. Because a lot of it's planning.
I want to start with the city of Detroit recognizes, when I checked this morning, 205 different neighborhoods. How did they decide?
Yeah, and you said officially. But they always tell me it's unofficial.
Oh, it's unofficial. Okay.
Yes,
tell us more about
these
that.
These are defined by people. They won't put any legal standing to any of the names or the boundaries or the lines. Although these get used in de facto and quasi-official ways all the time, which is, I think, where the most important aspect of this comes, and why we need more resident feedback and engagement.
How did we get with that unofficial list of 205, and where did those names come from?
That is a good question, and I don't know that anyone knows. I know folks worked on compiling things like historic districts, some well-known neighborhood names. The district managers were charged at that time with going out and figuring out what everything is or should be called. But there's no documentation of
That is so
what steps were taken or how they got there.
Interesting. I just want to, because Alex,
and I've interviewed a lot of people.
Yeah, I was going to say, Alex, just growing up, you would hear the Warrendale community in general, you would hear it growing up. I would hear that, I'm in the Warrendale community, or I'm in this community. But I'm just like you said, who decided to name it the Warrendale community?
Right.
You have no idea.
Well, I do know that one, actually.
Please.
So a lot of it is based on kind of planning efforts, which, historically planning and people don't always agree or work well together. But so city planners in the early 40s, Detroit annexed and grew over time to be the size that it is today. And many of those towns and villages that existed and got annexed by the city, those names remained. And so Warrendale is actually one of those. It was a town village that got absorbed by the city.
How cool.
Another good example is, we have an old Redford neighborhood, and because it was the village of Redford at one point. So that's where a lot of those names come from. I think some that folks hear a little bit more now are, when these, it was called the United Community Services at the time. Now that became the United Way. And they created sub-communities as a way to kind of plan and track and analyze to, improve the city, improve social services, that kind of thing. And those ended up as what we now have today as the city's master plan neighborhoods, which is separate than the Department of Neighborhoods 205 defined neighborhoods.
There's a lot of like different cooks in the kitchen on this one. I mean, we're talking about branding, which I think every American is obsessed with, whether they realize it or not. And I want to talk about the influence of like developers and real estate firms who have, in some cases, created neighborhood names to convey like a sense of trendiness or like entice people to move into these areas. And then you find that those names don't really aren't used by anybody that lives in the neighborhood. How has that had an influence on this?
Yeah, well, I guess most that I think of actually came from developers who the name did stick. So Island View is a great one. It was the Island View Development Corporation, and that Island View name kind of stuck around. Same with Rivertown. Like folks know kind of what Rivertown is now, but it was the Rivertown Development Corporation, and that name just kind of stuck around as well.
I used to live in Rivertown, but I would tell people I lived by Shane Park.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Just to seem cooler.
It just seemed like something people maybe knew more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But then there's others. If you go back even further historically, there's a developer who's named Frischkorn, and his name got adulterated to Fishcorn, and to the point where in the 80s and 90s there was actually a community organization they were called the Fishcorn Community Council or whatever. And that name got placed on maps, and so it's gone from Frischkorn to Fishcorn to Fiskhorn to now they've just dropped the K entirely. I don't know what. I saw a new like art print on the internet you could buy that the name was even shorter than.
So you've launched a website where residents can go and draw lines defining how they see their neighborhood. So listeners, you guys can go to detroit-neighborhoods.com. One thing that really stood out to me when looking at all of the submissions that are like laid over each other, really fun to like navigate map, is there's a lot of differing opinion on where neighbors are located. Some have like 5 different names that are competing with each other. What have you learned about this project from how residents view their neighborhoods?
Yeah, well, it's a very fuzzy process. Obviously, that's goes without saying. People have very different conceptions. You could talk to the same people on the same block, and they have different ideas of how far their neighborhood reaches or what's included in their neighborhood. And I think that's okay. I think that's the important part. And I think also, though, really fostering civic engagement in our city requires this kind of input and folks getting together and saying, well, what do we want to say is within our neighborhood? And having a strong community organization can also help then with access to resources, to investment, to social services coming. I know even in the city's strategic neighborhood framework process, which is a whole other set of neighborhood boundaries, actually it was Old Redford. Folks there said, the Brightmoor framework is happening. We're going to say that we're part of the broader Brightmoor area, so we can get included in here, and we can show up on the map, and we can be in the plan and get some funding maybe. And then all of a sudden, a lot of stuff they were doing in Old Redford was getting branded as Brightmoor, and they were like, wait, no. We're Old Redford. So it's there's competing priorities there, and there's some danger, I guess, in doing that process. But then you also do see things like Corktown is hot. Mm-hmm. People love Corktown, especially if you're a developer. So there was a while. I think it was mostly a joke, but it got people really worked up. Corktown Shores. Like part of Hubbard Richard was going to get rebranded as Corktown Shores. It was never going to happen. But, there were T-shirts and people got upset. But then there were developers who purchased land and property and tried to bring West Corktown into the mix. And I don't know. So eventually we were going to just become all
I think there is like
cardinal directions of Corktown.
I think there is like a West Corktown Neighborhood Association too. So it's interesting. I mean, I'm curious about how changes in the city have like impacted how we recognize places, because there's some older historic neighborhoods that don't really exist anymore, like Chinatown. We used to have 2 Chinatowns.
That's right.
There's an effort to like preserve the history there. Old Germantown doesn't really exist anymore. There's a lot of like little parts of Cass Corridor that are now just like labeled as Midtown, and I think that is one that people, a much more recent example of kind of like a rebranding effort. Can you tell us more about like the Midtown versus Cass Corridor debate?
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's one where definitely even the city's boundary for Midtown doesn't match what Midtown, Midtown Detroit Incorporated, the organization, recognizes as Midtown. But really, that was the confluence of the University Cultural Association, UCCA. I can remember
Yeah, either way.
UCCA and the New Center Council merged and formed Midtown Detroit Incorporated. So it always included kind of that, whatever was encompassed by the expressways as well as New Center. So New Center was always kind of on the verge of being Midtown, although that was always surprising to some folks. But then Midtown also, they look at and claim kind of edge areas like Virginia Park as part of an important, part of their neighborhood planning, as well as Milwaukee Junction.
The last thing I want to ask you about, and this is something you've been pretty adamant about, is that there needs to be more resident impact on how we decide what to call these places. How would you like to see that happen? Why is that essential?
Yeah, it is really essential because I know the city, won't call these official, but they get used officially. The data is on the city's open data portal. It's scraped by national corporations who then supply that data to places like Google and Zillow and Realtor. So when you're seeing the name change on those national maps, it's actually coming from the city of Detroit. So there is that opportunity to bring resident voice and feedback into the process so folks can define what they see on those maps.
Great.
And then, that also happened with redistricting. Folks were utilizing the Department of Neighborhood's boundary lines to change people's political representation.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
Well, we could have a whole conversation about the impact on redistricting, but unfortunately, we're out of time for today. Alex Hill, cartographer and founder of Detroitography, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Go map your own neighborhood at detroit-neighborhoods.com. We want to see those submissions.
Coming up on the Metro, the Detroit Film Theater turns 50. Elliot Wilhelm spoke with Ryan Patrick Cooper about the history and what's coming up this weekend at the DFT. Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham, joined by...
I'm Malachi Barrett, normally with Bridge Detroit, but I'm here this week.
This week, indeed. And the Detroit Film Theater inside of the DIA is celebrating its 50th year at the museum, screening movies from Detroit and around the world. And this weekend, they'll screen a buzzed about animated film. WDET's Ryan Patrick Cooper caught up with longtime director Elliot Wilhelm to find out more.
I love this movie. This picture was such an unexpected delight that, yes, we have it for a full weekend, for adults, for kids, for families, and for people who want to see what Variety actually called the best film at the Cannes Film Festival this year. It's an animated film about a single mom who feels guilty about some discipline that she gave to her daughter, Linda, and it turns out mom finds out that it was not warranted, that mom was wrong about what Linda did, and she wants to make it up for her. She wakes up the little girl and says, "What can I do to make it better? I'm sorry, honey, what can I do to make it better?" And she said, "I want you to make me chicken with peppers." That is the beginning of the story, and it's about mom's search to make her little girl the dish that she wants. And there are adventures involving live chickens, involving city of Paris being closed down because of a general strike, and the butcher shop not being open, not being able to get a chicken. These various little things begin to come together to get in mom's way, but she seems so obsessive about making sure this happens that the audience begins to wonder, what could that possibly be about? And the movie becomes a kind of a Babette's Feast for kids. And I hate the expression, warm-hearted, but Man, it really is. It's very sweet. It's very funny. It's very sophisticated. And it also, puts the lie to the whole thing about, well, animated films are naturally just just for kids. I'm sometimes guilty of that too. Like when I first sat down to look at Chicken for Linda, and now it's one of my favorite movies of the year.
Chicken for Linda screens Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Just search Detroit Film Theater. And here's the big thing. You can just walk up to the box office and buy a ticket. And you're buying a ticket during a very important year. The Detroit Film Theater, 50 years old this year, Elliot. And people don't know this. You've been there every year. You have been such a steward for cinema at the Detroit Film Theater. I know you're obnoxiously humble about this sort of thing, but 50 years, what does that mean to you about bringing cinema that a lot of this stuff would not have been played in Detroit otherwise?
Well, it's a really great feeling when you run into people who say they saw such and such a film years ago, and the movie changed their life in one way or another, or introduced them to what cinema can do, or that they met their spouse at a screening of the theater, and now their kid is an adult and is coming to the movies. All those things are wonderful. And the fact that it's the longest running single program in the history of the DIA is also wonderful. But what I find really thrilling, and the best part of all, is that people are still coming in big numbers to see films in a theater, on a screen, and to see films from around the world, an international selection of movies that are very different from week to week and are sometimes demanding and sometimes purely pleasurable, but always films that I think were made with a certain kind of passion. And what's great is that after 50 years, we haven't run out of them because people are making wonderful new movies. There is no real decline in the inventiveness and the talent and the passion that movie makers have for this medium. And as I say, this weekend, watching Chicken for Linda, there is no point at which I can say, there's nothing to see here anymore. I've seen every movie ever made, or I've seen every kind of movie ever made, or every film feels like it's an outgrowth of something else. It's not true. There's always exciting new work, and it's what keeps me excited about bringing those films to the public. I haven't flagged in energy yet, and that's really due to the movies, but most of all to our audiences at the DFT.
That was Elliot Wilhelm. The film Chicken for Linda opens tonight at the Detroit Film Theater and runs through this Sunday. Malachi. I was going to say the music's creeping back in. We're going to start dance party really quickly. But Malachi, it's been great hosting with you this week. We have a list of great co-hosts that are coming up next, but I just want to say to you, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Yeah, it's been
great. Thank you for adopting me. I felt like a little bit of a lost puppy this week with you guys, but kept my water full, and I'm not going to extend that metaphor anymore. No, this has been really fun. It's been a privilege. I loved being able to co-host with you. Thanks to Sam and David and Jack and everybody for making this such a great experience. We got some great folks coming up too. I'm excited to listen to Jake Neer of the Automotive News. We got Colin Jackson from Michigan Public, Orlando Bailey of Outlier Media. You got some good folks.
Yeah, and
in.
Next week we'll have Robin Vincent of Chalk Beat Detroit. Super excited to have Robin join us on the Metro next week. And once again, thank you. You had me laughing there because you're not a puppy. I told you grabbed the bull by the horns and you rode it. It was like a rodeo. You were riding this thing. So Thank you so much for strapping your boots on.
I'm a rodeo dog.
Yeah, you don't like horses though, so.
No, I don't. Well, this show is produced by Sam Corey, David Leans, and Jack Philbrand. Additional production support from Anel Scott and Sydney Walkley. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Music by Sam Bobian and Will Sessions.
Indeed. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and you want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.
We won't see you tomorrow. We'll see you Monday.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.